Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling Fascist GOP slash far right tries to stir primal, bodily, and psychosexual fears in anti trans attacks. So, I think this video is, in a way, stating the obvious, but the undiscussed obvious, the semi-conscious or even unconscious components of what the right wing is trying to do with their attacks on trans rights and on trans healthcare in various rhetorically, but also in action, in legislative action by the right wing, by GOP on the state level and potentially also on the federal level. And so these attacks are based on, obviously, I feel like I'm saying the obvious, but I'm putting it into words, and there are reasons why I'm doing that are political reasons and that are I think helpful reasons for protecting trans rights and trans people, and but it involves talking about the fears that people have that are, or the queasiness that people have about thinking about transitioning, sexual transitioning, if they themselves are not trans. Okay, and it's something that the pro-trans movement, in some cases, papers over or glances over in a way, and I think that glancing over doesn't get at the attacks and doesn't undermine the attacks on trans people enough in a way that's effective, and also and doesn't help people, I think, be solid allies and activists in a combined movement for trans rights and a bunch of other rights. Okay, it needs to happen together. I think, obviously, certain bills in certain states right now, it requires people to stand up specifically for trans rights, but this more in general, how to integrate that movement into a general left movement, into a general, let's call it hegemonic left movement, one that can capture the presidency, essentially, can capture majorities in legislative bodies in at the both state level and also in at the federal level. So anyway, so this is, again, I feel like I'm saying the obvious, but people have anxieties, people growing up, and have they're real bodily anxieties that people have about the damage that can be done to their bodies if they have either a penis or a vagina, and as children and also as adolescents and so forth and so on. There's a reality part of it, and then there's the fantasy part of it. So the reality part of it is, people's genitalia are sensitive parts of the body, and that can be injured, that can be hurt, and that people are worried about that, and they want to protect those parts of the body. It's something that has become in psychology, at least this worry or this concern has gotten out of fashion in a way, or talking about it, because Freudian psychology built that into sort of the center of people's psychology. And I am not going to say the degree to which, the importance to which this part of people's psychology and worry as children or as adolescents or even as adults plays in their overall psychological makeup. It could be a lot, or it could be only on the margins. But certainly, the anti-trans campaign rests upon these anxieties, rests upon a bunch of different anxieties. So it also rests on something called biopolitics. So on and off in various left venues often, or in academic discussions of the right wing and of fascism, um, people talk about fascism as biopolitics. And sometimes it sounds like a very abstruse and, slightly academic way to talk about fascism. But it is also accurate. Basically, um, fascism wants to reduce politics to, or their conception of society to, sort of a naturalistic, bodily, based on genetics often, or not often, almost always, some kind of essence, which in the last 150 years is considered to be genetics, since the discovery of human genetics, or just general biological genetics, so that somehow people's essences are being defiled. Okay, so there's a sense of purification, or of this genome, or of this genetic, whatever it is, inheritance, of a group of people, and so they're trying to uplift it and purify it, and save it from grave dangers of various kinds, from influxes of people from outside, or undermining from within inside, this sort of biological entity called the nation, okay, that has this kind of, and so this biopolitics is based also on people's, the way it works is that as a politics, it's not really biology per se. It's not based on an accurate picture of human biology, or also the sort of our biology as part of nature overall. So it's mythology based on, with some wisps of genetic science and so forth and so on, and basically what became eugenics, and it's made into a seemingly naturalistic, thing, but that is based on fundamental anxieties. So some of the fundamental anxieties are about purity and danger, what the anthropologists called purity and danger, which was a Mary Douglas, and wrote a book called that, and it's a study of how different cultures deal with contamination of various things. So contamination is a big part of cultures, and people work on contamination in different ways. So anyway, fascism is one of its fundamental anxieties is about the contamination of this body, this grouping, this biological grouping, supposedly called the nation. And then, but another way in the United States in particular, on individual, we're kind of a more individualistic country, or we are a highly individualistic country. It's also premised on a sense of fragility of the body itself, and that people are imminently going to be castrated. Okay, that they're going to lose power, and that this castration. So the gun fetish that is very prominent in American fascism, I just did a video about it, is part of this acting out, or attempting to undo this feeling of being vulnerable, or potentially castrated, or already castrated, or undoing it in some way by parading around with a gun and shooting other people with a gun. There's kind of a tragedy in a way that's trying to be undone by killing others, and spreading the tragedy all around. There's a number of different stories that you can find layered into that. But anyway, another part of this, beside the gun fetish and the gun cult, is the anti-trans campaign. So there's the reality portion of it is that certain very small sector of the population is deciding through a process, we hope, of psychological evaluation and careful decision making by either an adult person or by an adolescent in collaboration with their parents, that they are going to at least do a gender transition, if not also start the process of a sexual transition to the opposite sex in the degree they can do that. In other words, to some degree, to a degree that allows them a psychological peace that they're desiring, that they feel like they will achieve and so this needs to be sort of gamed out with them in the privacy of consultation with counselors and psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, and then also with their family, if that family is still involved. And then they can take steps to do something that is, that has risks, that is, that there's a downside to it, so forth and so on. But generally, the people who go through this process feel like it has been worth it for them. But anyway, this looking from outside on this process that should be private and should be a medical / psychological process or family process, or maybe a group of friends process, whatever, has been politicized, has been blown up by this attack on it, and this attack from the right wing, because the right wing sees that they can capitalize on the psychosexual anxieties that are triggered in people who are not trans, or who, whatever, who don't, maybe, who knows, maybe they might want to be trans, I don't know. But anyway, let's leave that out for the time being. Let's just say people who are alien, who think of that as an alien thing that they are afraid of, they're disgusted by, whatever it is. And so, and it's driving that it's politics based on people imagining themselves or thinking about, or basically a triggering feeling of castration anxiety for men or women, also, thinking about other forms of attack on their or people they know's bodies, so forth and so on, or their imagination of who knows, what's natural and what's, what people should be doing, that there's only one thing and there's only one way, and so they're not interested in thinking that other people have different feelings and opinions. So anyway, this biopolitics can get into people and get them feeling anxious, because frankly, it's hard if you're not trans. It's hard to think about doing that or having a doctor do things to you that you wouldn't want done because you're okay with your body as it is, basically. So, but there are people who are not, So that freedom to do that freedom to is what needs to be protected and what needs to be, and that idea, though, is what this this campaign is running on, and it's also not just on the far right. That anxiety and that fear is being stirred by centrists who are making as if these people are going too far, and you have to, making it seem like there's somehow something reasonable about this campaign when it's largely hysteria. So this hysteria of the right-wing campaign is based on these fears. So this is obvious, but I think it helps to think about this and to acknowledge that there are basic primal fears that are stirred up by this, but that are not it doesn't apply to you if you're it's something that makes you queasy or makes you, it's not applied to you. It's not your body. It's someone else's body, and someone else is, and you have to, it's good to make sure that the decision making is very clear when people decide to do this transition. And that might be a public policy. Certainly should be a professional decision by doctors. That only in the regulation of the medical profession is that, and the state bodies that regulate medicine, such as they are, should have certain guidelines and so forth and so on. But other than that, for lay people, including politicians, they really shouldn't have much to say about it. If guidelines are kept, so forth and so on. Obviously, there are potentials for malpractice and for various kinds of problems in this process that would need to be adjudicated on a case by case basis, so forth and so on. But and understanding that process, because it's been elevated by this in our consciousness, by this attack and by the predatory campaign to try to capitalize on what's a common, and it makes sense that people have these fears, and that are real fears, and some of them are real fears and some of them are fantasy fears that are in terms of real fears, that in the sense of based on one's sense of one's own body. In other words, you need to do real things to protect your genitalia as a man or as a woman, and or your body in some form or other, and how but other than that, it's your body. That's your body, and you got to protect that. But if someone else wants to do something to their body in this process, it's like that's their business. So but it's being made our business by this attack and by this attempt to create again this to create another avenue of attack for this biopolitics, and also to make parts of the left, and I'm addressing, seem to be unreasonable and predatory in their own right. So in other words, people on the left need to be very clear about what this process applies. It's not always safe as milk. It is a process that is has risks associated with it, but there are some people who are willing to take those risks, and families, so forth and so on, and they should be able to take those risks. And also, in terms of transgenderism, so this is, I've been talking about the transsexual component. I talked about it in the previous video about the media spat, but one needs to be very analytically clear about, in terms of transgenderism, there should be no attacks. In other words, people there should be a multiplicity of genders, and people should be able to choose their own gender. In terms of the actual sort of sexual transition, that's something that requires more medical consultation and so forth and so on. But in terms of people deciding what their gender is, it should really be, we should have a capacious culture that allows for that. And that's something, this capacity for multiple, for individual choice and multiple possibilities for individuals to be the gender that they want to be. That's another and easier, though not necessarily, for everybody easy, but still it's easier in terms of the risks associated with it, in terms of bodily harm and so forth and so on, and these sort of the psychosexual component that I'm talking about, or the let's say the bodily harm part of it. Still, people will have psychosexual reactions to, or they will, in their unconscious or in their various fears that they have and anxieties they have, they will have reactions to people who are come up unexpectedly in a different way in terms of gender, because people do orient themselves to each other. It's a role play thing that people call out to other people to act a certain way based on gender. Not everybody. You can decide to ignore the gender signals of one person or the other. But anyway, that is one way that people interact with each other. So, but anyway, I think it helps to have a multi-layered approach to it, and also to acknowledge real fears that people have that are being misapplied, that are being spread around and made to be a whirlwind of hysteria. And that's exactly where the right wants people. Exactly, and that's what they're trying to do with their campaign. So the more we talk in clear tones and with clear concepts about what's going on, the more we can diffuse this attack, and we can blunt it, and we can also then turn to the business, really, of more important things in the world. But it needs to be met with, as it is part of this wedge of the right wing that is trying to get into people's minds, get into people's fears, getting them all worked up. Okay. And we got to talk people down in different forms, different people from their, either, and there are a lot of it's out of ignorance. So education is important. And, but then also understanding and empathy is also important, and figuring out where people are and where their anxieties are, or what they're trying to do with your anxieties, what they're trying to do with other people's anxieties, their political plan to stir up certain anxieties and to get people in a snit, in a state of anxiety, and then to rush to either to stay on the sidelines if they're people who would be inclined to protect trans people, or to basically to actually to join this anti-trans campaign because they're so worked up about these fears they have. So anyway, so I hope this is a helpful, set of a bit of discourse that you can use, or you can think about looking at this campaign. I will discuss biopolitics in other ways. We have some very interesting and important factoids or utterances that support this view of fascism, and how fascism is trying to get into people's heads and create a movement that undermines our civilization. Anyway, so I hope you find some of this interesting. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and also please like the video if you thought it was worthwhile or had some current kernels of interesting thoughts. And also please subscribe to Politics 2100 if you're getting something out of these videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.